Look at the time right now. Go on. It's already there. Down to the minute, glowing in the corner, handed to you before you even thought to ask. You'll do that 100 times today without noticing once. Wrist, screen, microwave, dashboard. Time follows you around, like it's afraid you'll forget it. So here's a question you have never once had to answer. If every clock on Earth went dark tonight, every phone, every watch, every glowing number, how would you know what time it is by morning? Take a second, because for almost the entire human story, that was not a riddle. It was Tuesday. No clock, no calendar. Nothing counting for you in the background. You wake up, and the only questions that keep you alive? What season is this? How many days until the cold? When do the herds come back? Have exactly one place to look for an answer. Up. The sky was the only clock anyone had. No numbers, no batteries, no second chances if you read it wrong. And people learned to read it anyway. Well enough to plant, to migrate, to survive an ice age. The unsettling part is just how good they got with nothing but their eyes and a long memory. Start with the loudest clock up there. The moon. It doesn't just hang in the dark. It changes on a schedule in a way you can literally count. Sliver, half, full, then shrinking back to nothing. And around again, every 29.5 days, without fail, forever. You don't need to be clever to catch that. You just need to look up twice and remember the first time. Which is why, in language after language after language, the word for month turns out to be the word for moon, wearing a slightly better coat. So the moon became the first calendar the species ever had. Free, faithful, hanging over every human on Earth at once. But it comes with a hidden crack. And this one eventually breaks calendars for 4,000 years. The moon and the sun keep two different schedules, and they never, ever line up. Hold that thought. It comes back to haunt everyone. Here's the problem with counting moons in your head. One long winter, one bad fever, and you lose count. And losing count could mean planting too early and watching it all die in a frost. So, people did the oldest trick in the book. When they stopped trusting their memory, they cut the count into something that couldn't forget. In a cave on the edge of South Africa, someone picked up the leg bone of a baboon and carved notches into it. 29 of them, deliberate, evenly spaced. That bone is 43,000 years old. It's the oldest counting object our species has ever left behind, and we call it the Lebombo bone. Let that number actually land. 43,000 years ago. Before farming, before writing, before cities were even a dream, a human being sat in the dark and kept careful track of something, one mark at a time, because it mattered enough to get right. Thousands of years later, and a continent away in the Congo, another bone surfaces, crowded with tidy little groups of notches, the Ishango bone, pulled out of the ground by a Belgian geologist named Jean de Heinzelin in the 1950s. People have been fighting about what it means ever since. And here, I have to be straight with you, because the internet won't be. You'll find 100 videos swearing these bones are lunar calendars. Maybe they are. 29 notches, a 29-day moon, it's a seductive little match. But nobody can prove it, and the honest truth is better than the guess. We are holding the oldest notebook on Earth, and we still cannot read the handwriting. It might be a calendar, it might be arithmetic, it might be a hunter counting the dead. And keep one more thing in the back of your mind as we go. The strangest clock in this entire story isn't a bone, or a stone, or a star. You're carrying it right now, and you have never once had to wind it. We've saved that one for last. The moon hands you the month. It will never, ever hand you the year. And the year is the one you cannot afford to miss. Read it wrong, and you plant into a killing frost. But the sun refuses to help. It doesn't change shape like the moon. It just drifts along the horizon and slides back, saying absolutely nothing. So people did something almost insane in its ambition. If the sun won't announce the year, they built a machine out of solid rock to ambush the single most important sunrise of it. In Ireland, there's a tomb called Newgrange, 5,000 years old. Older than the pyramids. Older than Stonehenge. From outside, it's just a grassy gray mound you'd walk straight past, but its builders left a narrow slot above the door, a box cut into stone, aimed at the horizon with a precision that should not exist yet. And for about 17 minutes, on one morning a year, the winter solstice, the shortest, darkest day, the rising sun threads that slot, tears 19 meters down a pitch-black passage, and sets the very back wall of the chamber on fire with light. Then it's gone, for another whole year. A man named Michael O'Kelly was the first modern human to crouch in that chamber at dawn and watch it arrive. In 1967. Sit with what that means. Someone engineered a machine to keep one appointment with the sun, and it has kept that appointment dawn after dawn for 5,000 years, through empires, plagues, and the invention of everything, in an empty room, with nobody there to watch. And Newgrange isn't a fluke. A stone circle stranded in the Egyptian desert, Nabta Playa, 7,000 years old, aimed at the summer sunrise, the exact morning the rains used to break. A field in Scotland with 12 pits gouged into it around 8,000 years before Christ pointed dead at the midwinter dawn. Strangers, oceans, and millennia apart, all reaching the same conclusion. If the year won't tell you where it stands, pin it to the ground with stone and make it hold still. But you can't fold a stone circle into a bag and carry it, and most people were still moving, following the food, running from the weather. They needed a clock that traveled with them. So they lifted their eyes past the moon, past the sun, all the way out to the stars. The Egyptians hung an entire civilization on a single one. Every summer, in the last gray minutes before dawn, the star we call Sirius climbs back over the horizon after months of being gone. And almost to the day it reappeared, the Nile began to flood. The flood that grew the food that fed the kingdom. So that was New Year, not a square on a page, a single star clearing the edge of the world. And here's the part that genuinely raises the hair on my arms. Halfway around the planet, people who had never heard of Egypt, who never would, were running the exact same trick on a different scrap of light. A faint little smudge of stars called the Pleiades. A Greek farmer named Hesiod wrote the rule down 3,000 years ago. Harvest when they rise, plow when they set. The Maori in New Zealand watched that same smudge to time their planting. So did farmers in the high Andes. Nobody taught anybody this. There was no message passed hand to hand across the oceans. It simply keeps happening, on its own, wherever a clever animal spends enough silent nights under an honest sky. The same faint stars, whispering the same instruction to strangers on every continent. It's time. Still, everything so far dies the moment the sky goes dark or gray. Sooner or later, people wanted to carve up the day itself, and to keep time indoors at midnight, in the rain. So they stopped waiting on the heavens and started building. The Egyptians drove a stick into the ground and read its shadow, the first shadow clocks, and split the daylight into 12. And when the sun abandoned them, they handed the job to water. A jar with a tiny hole, draining drop by patient drop, the falling level marked off in hours. A clock that runs in the pitch dark, and that hidden crack I told you to hold on to, the moon and sun refusing to agree, it never healed. Even Egypt's proud 365-day calendar had no leap year, so it slipped, one full day every 4 years, drifting until the whole thing had wandered an entire year out of place, seasons landing in the wrong months. Nobody ever built the perfect calendar. That's the real story of timekeeping. Not triumph, but 4,000 years of people patching the gap between the moon and the sun, and never once closing it. Oh, and the reason there are 60 seconds in your minute, 60 minutes in your hour, and 360 degrees in the circle in your head, that isn't physics. That's a bookkeeping habit the Sumerians picked up 4,000 years ago, because 60 is a gloriously lazy number that divides a dozen different ways. Every time you say half past or quarter to, you are speaking a dead language from ancient Iraq, fluently and without the faintest idea. Which brings us all the way back to you. Your phone, your 100 careless glances a day. For almost all of human history, time was something you had to hunt. You watched the eastern horizon before sunrise, praying for a star. You counted notches by firelight, terrified of losing your place. You waited a whole year for a single blade of light to crawl up a wall. Time was scarce and hard-won, and you had to go out into the cold and find it. But here is the thing not one of those bone carvers or star watchers ever knew. They didn't actually need any of it, because the entire time they stood out there interrogating the sky, a clock was already running inside their own skulls, and it had never missed a day. Deep in your brain sits a tiny knot of cells that keeps a rhythm of almost exactly 24 hours, sun or no sun, cave or open field, whether you're paying attention or not. We only cracked how it works recently. The scientists who found the genes running that clock won the Nobel Prize in 2017. So every ancestor who ever squinted at the moon or held their breath waiting on a star was already carrying the very thing they were searching for. And so are you. You are keeping perfect time, this second, without lifting a finger. You always have. Their only real advantage over you was patience. The patience to look up, night after night, and check the clock ticking in their heads against the enormous one turning overhead. So the next time your phone slips you the hour before you ask, maybe glance up anyway. Just once. The way every last one of them did for 100,000 years, hoping the sky would tell them where they stood in time. Wonder, one question at a time.